What's up, everybody? This is Alex from the Duran, and I am here with the one and only Peter Lavelle, host of RT's show, Crosstalk. Peter, thanks for joining the Duran. Today, we are going to speak about Putin's long game in diplomacy and if it's working with his European neighbors. Peter, I read a really interesting article from Paul Craig Roberts, who you've interviewed in the past, and he posited that Putin's strategy of really taking a moderate tone towards all the pressure that and all the prodding that Russia has taken on by the Western democracies, the US and Europe, is actually starting to bear fruit now. And the Europeans are starting to come around and see that Putin's, I don't want to say soft hand, but Putin's measured approach to dealing with crises and chaos, mostly from the West, is actually the right way to move forward in a multipolar world. Do you think that Russia's diplomacy and Putin's diplomacy when dealing with his European neighbors, in light of, number one, Trump pulling out of the Iran deal, and number two, the U.S. Embassy opening in Jerusalem, which has provoked a lot of chaos in the region, do you think that the Europeans are starting to see things Putin's way?
They're going to, but it's going to be a very, very difficult path for them to go down. The problem is for the Europeans, and I'll deal with the Russian side in a second, is that because of their gross overdependence on the United States, they've limited their options. See, this is what they have done. It's very difficult for them to push back other than rhetorically. And this is one of the interesting things that the Russians have been watching, because we have also the threat of sanctions on the back of pulling out of the Iran deal, which is terrifying for a lot of companies. Because how much trade does the United States have with Iran? I mean, it's what is it? It's cashews and rugs. Okay, that's it. But the Europeans have a whole lot more. Siemens has already publicly said that they won't pursue any more new deals. Let's watch that word "new" and see how the U.S. Treasury reacts to that. Is it working for the Russians? Is Putin's plan working? Yes, as well as it possibly could. The problem is that the European Union itself is in crisis. We have weak leaders. Merkel is there by a thread in power. Macron has turned into an embarrassment, and he's proving himself to be very ineffective. And Theresa May, she's still there? I mean, it's amazing that she's still there, okay? And so he doesn't have interlocutors that can make a deal, that he can trust, okay? And because of this over-dependence that is really threatening not only Europe's economy, but also its security. Because if we look at the dynamics of what's going on in the Middle East, particularly Syria, I mean, the United States, are they going to put pressure on the Europeans to be another NATO expedition into the Middle East? I mean, it's grossly unpopular. Leaders in Europe, are they going to be swayed by the Trump administration? Itself is it's very, very unpopular. So Putin's patience, yes, it's strategic patience. And I think he's waiting for an overture. Look what happened with Victory Day here on May 8th. We had Benjamin Netanyahu. And, the big debate going on inside of Russia, among my circle of friends, is that did Putin cave to Netanyahu? And my supposition is no. He's being very careful. Netanyahu and Putin made some kind of deal. We don't know what it is, okay? It has a lot to do with Iran. And I think it's more patience that the Russians are showing. And considering what's going on, the dynamic with the Paris Climate Accord, a new trade agreement with the European Union. All of these things have gone to the wayside. So Putin is waiting for an opportunity, the moment to make an end, okay? Because all of the things that have happened during the Trump administration vis-a-vis Europe, a lot of things are unraveling. And so why should the Russians poke their nose into what's a dynamic between the Americans and the Europeans? And I think he's still waiting it out. But you're right, the strategic patience that Russia has shown, Putin has shown, is really quite extraordinary, considering, the alleged poisoning scandal in the UK, the alleged poisoning attacks in Syria, the whole Russia thing in the United States, and in taking their consulates away, kicking people out, demonizing RT as a foreign agent. I could go on. We could go on and on and on about this subject. So I think, yes, it is working. What kind of fruits it's bearing, I don't think we're there yet. One thing is that Russia's policies are very consistent. That's something the Europeans are going to learn to admire because we don't know what Donald Trump is going to do on a lot of things. And this is something that they want. But the fact that they have made themselves so over-reliant on the United States, they're really at a ground zero and how to reassess what their options are. I mean, they've been talking about a pan-European military force for a long time, okay? But why pay for it if the American taxpayer will pay for it? See, this is the slippery slope. This is the moral hazard that the Europeans have gone down for decades now. And then when you hit a wall, you have no options whatsoever. Now, the European Union, its economy is larger than the United States collectively. They have a lot of assets. They have actually a lot of power, but they don't know how to concretize it and use it effectively. They're very much like the United States. They use their policy approaches are like blunt objects. Okay, and they've got to learn how to deal with things in a more finessed way. I mean, when you look at the European Union, their biggest foreign policy adventure on their own was Ukraine, and look what happened there. Okay, and right now we have this difference with the U.S. approach to Ukraine and the European ones. I mean, behind the scenes, the Europeans are like saying, we didn't want into this with Poroshenko and all this stuff. The Americans keep it going. And it's another division that the Europeans have with the Americans because they say we don't need a conflict on our border. I mean, Ukraine has got to clean up its act before we can really properly engage with it. And it's not because they have the moral hazard and the slippery slope of Washington, the Boltons and the Pompeos and always confused Nikki Haley. Okay? So these are always the dynamics that are in play. Everything's in flux right now. But the good thing is I mean, I've always been, I'll use the strong word, been disgusted at how the Europeans follow the United States.
Right.
So that's where we are right now. Right? But I think that yes, we're on the cusp of seeing some fruits being all of this. To cite the article that you mentioned.
Right. So we know that Merkel and back then Cameron and all these guys had a very close relationship with Obama. And you know that they're always going to agree with the United States given Europe's dependency on the United States, but they also liked dealing with Obama. If Trump is to, say Trump should win a second term and you're looking at an 8-year presidency, do you see that perhaps in that second term, looking forward, that the Europeans might actually make real gains towards breaking away from the U.S.'s stranglehold on their foreign policies?
I think we can. I think what everybody does, from the House of Cards to the European Union, everybody's looking at what's going to happen at the midterms. If the Republicans hold on, or their losses are, because we all know that for a first-term president, the first round of midterms is usually a bloody nose. But if and this is where we go back to Korea, if he can get a win, the touching of a win. We have the Jerusalem embassy fiasco, but that's popular in the U.S. If Trump and the GOP can hang on more or less, or not take such a hard loss in the midterms, then the Europeans are going to say the clock is ticking. The clock is ticking, and we both know that the power of the incumbency. For a rule of thumb, an incumbent, it's an election for the incumbent to lose. Okay, so I think that what is November, whatever, 8th or something like that, the Europeans, if Trumpism maintains its quiet down, boys, maintains this juggernaut, then the Europeans are going to start saying we need a white paper or start doing this. But it's in their own interest to do this. Let's go way back in history, because that's what I used to do I was an academic historian. Trump is actually right about trade deals. In many ways, he's absolutely right. But these were trade deals that the United States made with Japan, with Australia, with Taiwan, because of the Cold War. They basically bribed everyone into Pax Americana. And, the American economy at the end of the Second World War was 50% of the world. Large yes. We can lose a little bit, but now 15% of the world GDP. And these other countries make money off of those deals, okay? And so the United States, and I agree with Trump principle, he needs to reassess these trade deals.
Do you think the Europeans, on a final note, Europe within itself is fragmented? Do you think the Europeans can actually form a consensus within themselves to move as one unit, as one union, away from the United States?
That would be a very tricky rabbit to pull out of a hat, because we all know the European Union and NATO were all a reaction to the Soviet Union. Okay, now can we have the same formula against an outsider? That would be very, very difficult. But I mean, if we have a United States that is openly at odds with European values and policies and approaches, then you'll start seeing it. I don't think it would ever be adversarial, but it won't be the same kind of cozy family that both sides of the Atlantic have liked to have shown. I mean, talk about the Atlantic community consensus. That's coming to an end, for sure. But because of how Europe, you have this privileged, unelected, bureaucratic class that is constantly centralizing the European Union against the will of so many people in the member countries. That's something they're going to have to deal with. So it's like 3 or 5 dimensional chess that we're playing, because there's so many different angles. Because we have divisions, very great divisions inside of the European Union. I lived in Eastern Europe before I moved to Russia. They are very different from the Westerners in the European Union. And I warned about this. I warned them. Okay? And so we have that in play here. One of the things, again, if I can kind of harken back to my academic days, the problem with all of this is that no one has ever able to come to terms about the role of Germany in Europe. Okay? Remember the adage, NATO, the European Union, is to keep the Russians out, the Americans in, and the Germans down. Okay? And now it's how to deal with the German question. It's a real question today because of its economic might. It does have hegemonic tendencies. Okay? It's a powerful country. And this is something to push. Okay? And because of the perception of Germany's role in Europe. And they have to get over that. The Europeans have to get over that as well. But if someone were to ask me, would you like to see an independent, self-sufficient Europe where Germany leads? I'd say yes. I wouldn't have a problem with that. Okay? I wouldn't. Okay? I wouldn't. Because I think they've internalized their own history. They're careful about that. Okay? The other countries in Europe would have a hard time stomaching that. But do you want a hegemon 6,000 miles away, or do you want somebody that you can actually deal with on your own landmass? I think that's an interesting question that's going to be answered. It's being posed right now, and will have to be answered. I don't want to see Europe destroy itself. I don't. I don't like the European Union. I don't like its postmodernism. I think it's very, very destructive. But American hegemony is more destructive in many ways.
Very much a lesser of two evils, if you could put it that way. But without a doubt,
sure.
Yeah, without a doubt,
but
Trump has been a.
But that's politics.
That's
politics.
politics. That's politics. And Trump was definitely something that I think the Europeans never expected, and now they're having to deal with the Trump factor and the Trump effect. So on that note, Peter Lavelle, thank you very much again for taking the time to speak with us here at the Duran. Peter Lavelle, host of RT's Crosstalk. Everyone, don't forget to hit that red button, that subscribe red button. Hit the notifications bell so you can get notifications every time we push out a new video. And visit drnshop.com, pick up a shirt, pick up a retro poster. We have a lot of great merchandise. You help support the Duran. You help support independent journalists.